Hi, I'm Liz from Pinhole Quilting. In this session, I'm going to cover Moxie with the Pro-Stitcher Lite. It's a fantastic combination, and we're delighted that here in the UK we can offer you a long arm, 15-inch long arm with computerized system for under £11,000. That's as of August 2023. Now, what the Moxie on an 8-foot loft frame enables us to do is to be able to do our computerized work as well as free motion quilting work. We have our gears underneath here and on the carriage, and I can go between free motion and computerized very easily. It comes with over 250 designs, and you can buy more designs online should you wish from many of the computer design software sites that you've got out there. So what we're going to do today? Well, I've got this lovely quilt that someone's pieced together. It's a Quilts for Care Leavers quilt, so I've been given the opportunity to custom quilt it and really play with some of the options on Pro-Stitcher Lite. And it's been really interesting for me to do that and compare it to Pro-Stitcher Premium, which is the version of Pro-Stitcher that's for the bigger machines. It's got heavier motors, it's got over 800 designs, and it primarily goes with the Amara, the Infinity, Old Avanti and Simplies that you might have as well. So here I've got Pro-Stitcher Lite, and I'm going to be basically doing the top and the bottom borders. When you do borders, you've got to think about how you're going to do the side borders. Do you chunk, which is where you do it in sections as you proceed down the quilt, or do you turn? You take the quilt off the frame, you rotate it 90 degrees, repin it onto some cloth leaders, and then stitch the borders that would have been the sides now in one straight section within the throat space of your machine. It's a great option, and it's what I recommend that you do if you want to have nice looking borders without lots of stops and starts. It actually takes you less time in the long run. Right, well, let's dive in and have a play. We have got this outer border, and I want to put a design that goes in the corner, and then I'll have my quilting design run all the way along and then finish with a corner down here. So I'm going to do it in 3 sections. I've already measured up what this actually is. So to get a feel for it and to plan my quilt, I've done some rough sketches. I mean, literally this rough. So I know I've got 41 inches across. I know each of the borders is around 3 inches. I've got an inner border that's 23 inches and again 3 inches on those borders. So I've worked out that I want about 2¼ inch wide design within here so that it doesn't come right up to the edge of this stitching line here, and I want to have enough space for my binding. So those kind of calculations, definitely worthwhile doing some measurements maybe before you even put it on the frame. So just to know, so that you know, that's the kind of planning that I would do. What I also do is think about the corner. So the corner design might be symmetrical, but it might not. And you do give yourself a lot of problems if you're trying to do all 4 sides. And if it's not completely symmetrical, you really need to think about whether when you squidge it in, whether you fit it in, and particularly when you're doing a long section like this, are you going to end up with like a leaf at the top, and then the next leaf is also at the top instead of at top and bottom, top and bottom, top and bottom. So that's what I've got here, and I've had to think about that. And also I've had to think about scaling it. So, okay, so we're just going to see that a little bit more clearly now. So here we go. I've got on my screen here, and the orange crosshairs represent my needle. And I've got 3 different designs. So let me just go into select. You see the first one is the first corner on the left, then I've got a long border, and I've got a right-hand corner as well. So how did I set that up? So let's do File Clear All. I have saved them previously. I want to open up, in the default designs, I've got a corner design, which is called Leaf Border 2 Corner. Now let's have a look at this design. This border corner has a little scroll in it up here, which is lovely. And it's also got the stop at the bottom, start at the bottom rather, and the stop at the top right. And it comes in as a 10.67 by height of 8.82. So the first thing that I want to do, so what I want to do first of all is look at my quilt and see where, if I press this one, you'll see the frame space. This is the corner of my quilt, where my crosshairs are right now. And the corner of the The border, the inside corner of the border is just here. Let's put the grid on, it might actually help in this respect. Okay, there's a grid there. Okay, so if we look at the quilt itself, let me just show you physically how that appeared. Top left, inner border left. I've got a measure tool on here, so turning it on and off, I can then measure what that distance is. And I can see that I've got to reduce the size of that 10.67, which represents this distance across here, and that across there. I really need to reduce that by quite a lot. I can work out proportionally what that is by if that was a square, but it's much harder as a rectangle. So I'm going to modify. What I want to do is modify, resize, and I want to lock the dimensions and change it to probably about 6. I'm then going to measure, let's just move this. Pick it up and physically move it close to where we want it to be. And now I'm going to measure that distance. Zoom in, press zoom, draw a square. I'm going to measure that distance, the width. I know it needs to be about 2.25 from those measurements that I already did of the quilt itself. 2.25, so that is 2.69, so I need to modify and resize it a little more. Let's make it 5.75. So that's now, take the measure off, put it on again, and then move it. 2.65 on the X, so resize 5.5. And I'm doing it proportionately so that when it comes to actually stitching both the top and the bottom borders, it's going to work. 2.43, 2.48. Okay, so let's do 5. Take the measure off, take the measure, put the measure on, and now move it. 2.26. Okay, so it's 5. Now I'm going to baseline. Oh, I pressed the gears, that's unfortunate. Fat finger syndrome. Baseline. And I will need to now redefine my frame space. So to define the frame space, we go into area, we go to frame space, and on the right hand side you'll see 2 corner. I've moved my crosshairs, my needle, up to the very top of the quilt. Now I'm moving it to the very bottom and pressing 2 corner again. And now you can see that my top left of my border of my quilt is now got the leaf in it. Okay. I would save that. So I go File, Save, Selected. And I would do the same thing for the right hand side. This time what I need to do is I need to rotate it 45 degrees, 45 degrees, so 90 degrees. And the reason being that way, when I bring in my leaf design, which I'm going to show you now, I will go to Continuous Line in 1PS Designs. I'm going to find the leaf that matches this corner, which is called Leaf Border 2. What you can see here, if I just move that corner out the way, this is the design. It's got a leaf going upwards and a leaf going downwards. And now if you look at what we're trying to do here, is I need to have that border going up, down, up, down, up, down. And on the right hand side, it starts with a top. So I need to have the previous one as a bottom. Okay. Now, let's take that measure off. Now, this border at the top will just be going to repeat. I will just add as many repeats as I need to do, but I'm not going to do that yet. What I'm going to do is, and I would have to scale it. First of all, I will stitch the left-hand side, then I'll stitch the right-hand side, and then I'll put this in the middle. I will, if I just go to undo, 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 until I've got that basic one, I'm going to modify that and scale it and resize that border until I've got 2.25. which is the same height as my corners. I save that, selected, and that's going to be my base. So that would be my leaf border 2 base design. The point being that then I've now got everything in place except the number of repeats for the top. So now let's just pick up each of those things in turn. I'm just going to clear all and do it so that you can see the whole workspace. Let me bring in the ones I did previously. So File, Design, Open. I'm going to go into, I put them in two PS tutorials. I'm going to open up my left border, and there it is. And I can move that to where I want it to be. Now I could have moved my crosshairs to where I want the start to be, but actually I didn't know exactly where I want. In fact, what I'm use will be the quilt itself. So let me bring you out. You see the rest of our showroom. So what I want is, if I put measure back on, I want the quilt design to start in that corner about 3/4 of an inch in, top and bottom. So 0.75 on my measure tool is pretty much, she says. I need to look at the quilt, so keep looking away. Okay, a little bit too far down there. So I've come in diagonally 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, diagonally about an inch. And I'm going to modify that design's position. I'm going to reposition it using my needle to represent the top left. And now it's moved. I baseline that. Now I'm just going to check. Let's just bring it up to full size. I'm going to check and see where it's going to stitch. Make sure that it's not going to stitch over the border. I'm ready to stitch. Get a Pro-Stitcher, press Run, press Proceed. Takes a stitch, I move it aside. Do resume. Make sure you got the right number of stitches per inch. I'd forgotten to change it back from when I basted it. Does the micro stitches first. Nice little scroll. There we go. Does the micro stitches at the end, and that is the first corner stitched out. Using my quilt for the alignment, just move that. I am going to use the measure tool and come in 3/4 of an inch. Zoom in to where I am. So on the screen it will show my X and Y. 3/4 of an inch. Yep, bang on. Now I'm going to modify and reposition and make that the top right of where my design is. Then I'm going to check and make sure that it's not too close. So that is going to come there. It's going to stitch about there. Actually, it's a little closer than I want, so I'm going to nudge that away. So reposition, nudge, I can move the design up a little. Just check the right hand side. I'm happy with where it is on the right. As you know, it could maybe go a little bit. So maybe 3/4 of an inch is a little bit too generous on this one. Maybe it's a little tighter on the border. I'm happy with that now. So I'm going to go Pro-Stitcher, hold my thread, press run, press proceed. It takes a stitch, I move it to the side, I pull up the threads, press resume. Okay, let's just get that on the big screen. Okay, so now you can see both my borders. So I'm going to go into Pro-Stitcher, press run, press proceed. Takes a stitch, I move it away, bring that up. Press resume. Does the final tie-off stitches. I do one more needle down, needle up, just to finish it off. Come back, bring up the thread, and just cut those off level with the quilt. Basically brought in the design at the point that I wanted the start point to be, which was the final leaf on this left-hand side. That then loaded my leaf, my two leaves next to it. Now I increase the number of repeats by going to the repeat tab, and your first thing you do is put in basic, how many horizontal or vertical repeats. So I'm just going to put this on here. I'm going to increase the number of repeats until I fill it. Pretty close, one more. Now, if I'm feeling really lucky, not quite as lucky as on the previous one, it will, if I zoom in, you'll see how far out it is. So do you see, I need to squidge it up a bit. So what about if I set up an area? I'm not worried about the height, because I want the height to stay the same. But if I now set up an area that represents that border, I will go to Area tab, to corner, there's my top left, and then go as far as the leaf on the right-hand side. There's my bottom right. So I've now got a nice thin little pink box. And I'm going to modify, so let's baseline my leaves, and now I'm going to modify them so that they skew. I resize them to the same as that box. Oh, I wonder if I skew. Let's think. If I resize it or skew. I didn't want to do the height. Maybe what I'll do, so okay, so if you had the height, you could use what I just did, but actually I'm just going to do measure to there. So 28.64, so it's slightly less than the bottom. Obviously the quilt isn't very square. So I am going to resize, not going to lock it this time, I'm just going to do the width to that 28.65. which press enter, and that squidged it in. I'm going to put the start point, so baseline. Now I'm going to modify, reposition my start point because it sort of scales it equally. And now if I go over to this side here, that's now perfectly aligned to the stop point. Baseline that, Pro-Stitcher, look at the frame space, and away we go. Run, proceed. Resume. And now it's going to stitch my top border. Very puffy quilt. final leaf. One more. There we go. Let's trim that off. And that is my borders and corners. There we go. I'm ready to do the inner border now, which is, let's tilt the camera. So I've stitched along here, along the top and down. I've got one more inner border to do, and then I'm going to turn my quilt 90 degrees and reload it, having trimmed off the wadding and squared up the backing. And that's it. Pro-Stitcher Lite borders. Pro-Stitcher Lite, let's do some borders. I've already done the top border of this quilt, but now I've got this inner border to do. It's actually the same measurements, so this isn't going to be too difficult to do. So I'm just going to pull up the left-hand corner and the right-hand corner and then see how much I've got to join in terms of repeats of the design. It's one of the reasons why I didn't join that top one is I've got the flexibility of doing top left, top right and the middle section. There are occasions when we can pick in the workspace and just go top left corner, straight bit, top right, and it'll stitch all of them in one go. But that's not what I've done here because, as I say, I've got a double border, so I wanted to use a bit more flexibility by not having them joined. So on my workspace right now, I've just picked up, I've closed some of the things I had open. I've got the 3 items on my workspace. I'm just going to pick and drop where I want them to stitch. Let's do it. There we go, you can see my workspace. So where my crosshairs are, this is my top left corner. I'm going to stitch that out first. Then I'm going to stitch this one on the right hand side, which is greyed out at the moment. Then I'm going to reduce the number of repeats of the bottom of this, which is where I've got all of the repeats that join those two things together. So first of all, I'm going to move my needle to the position on the quilt where I want the top left of that corner design to be. So I'm going to modify, reposition top left. And then I'm going to check and see if that matches with what I hope I've got. And it does. So in other words, it's not going to hit the edges of the border, it's going to stitch it where I want. Okay, so I'm going to baseline that. I'm going to get a Pro-Stitcher, I'm going to run, I'm going to proceed. And let's stitch it out. So it takes a stitch, move it away, press resume. I hope you can hear the thunder and lightning. This is traditional summer weather in England. Obviously got way too humid. Okay, let's see it on the actual quilt. final tie off stitches, and then needle down, needle up. It really is thunder and lightning. Okay, let's do the right hand side. So now I pick the second design, so I literally just touch it on the screen and it highlights it. I decide where it's going to go. So I'm just going to see if I modify, reposition, make that the top right this time. And it moves it. I baseline it if necessary. It hasn't needed to be baselined. And then I just check, where is it going to stitch? Make sure that I'm happy with where it's going to stitch. Zoom in if necessary. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Yep. It's a little bit close. I'm going to nudge it. There we go. So nudged it a bit. Make sure it's sitting. I mean, I could mark how far away it is, but I'm happy with that. Just visually, you can eyeball some of these things. I'm sure some people wouldn't want to eyeball them. They just go, no, I'm going to get that absolutely spot on. But I have to say, where I feel it's not going to be critical, I will take a pragmatic approach. I'm going to zoom in this time so you can see it a little closer. Bird's eye view. And those are the tie-off stitches indicating that it's finished the design. I'm going to reopen it, but this time have it exactly where I want it to start. Now I'm going to go to repeats and increase the number of repeats until I'm close. Oh, it's going to be tight. It's going to be tough to do this one. Because let's see, we've actually got to probably stretch it. So I'm going to do one less repeat and stretch it to fit. So I need it to basically be modified. Let's baseline it for that number of repeats. And then I'm going to modify and resize it on the width to 11.5. Okay, so let's just modify and reposition to start point. There we go. So now it's fitted in beautifully. Basically, stitch all of these in one go if we wanted to, just by doing what I just did. So let's just undo, undo, undo. I've got 3 different elements to my design, and on the right you'll see in the workspace each of them listed. If I click none in the bottom left of the screen, You'll just about see it on that screen. You can either click none, you can click select one at a time, or select everything. All right, you don't want to select everything, so let's select none. And then in turn, when you've got select one at a time, you can click your left border, the middle border, and then the final right border. That enables you to stitch all of them in one go, and you could even rename it as a group. So you can now stitch that out, and that's what I might do on the bottom. On the other side of this, I've got another, I've got the other side of the border. So I could have done that. However, because of the fact I've actually already stitched the left and the right, I only want to do the middle. I'm just going to pick this middle section here, and I'm going to stitch that out. So how did I get that into that position there? Let's go File, Clear All. So first of all, I decide where I want my first design to be, and I position that and stitch it out. Then I stitch my second design, and once I've done my second design and first design, I can now see where I want my middle section to go. So I move the crosshairs until I'm right over the stitching of the leaf design and where it finishes, which on that screen is where it represented by the orange crosshairs. And what I do there is I'm going to press measure, and then I'm going to move across to the right and just measure to where the start is of the right hand border. So it's 11.5 inches. Remember that number? Write it down even. Okay, I'm going to move my crosshairs back to that first point, because that is where my design will load, and I will load up the design I previously scaled to fit, which is called Leaf Border 2 Liz. And there it is. And you'll see, and actually you can't see on that screen, but it is 2.65 by 2.2 high. Now, I need multiple repeats of this, so I will go to the Repeat tab, and I will increase the number of repeats like so. And I need that whole thing to be 11.5. So at the moment, the Repeat Leaf Border Liz, if I go into the Repeat tab, it tells me what the width is. It's 11. So I need it to stretch a little. So I could resize it here to 11.5. And it just stretches it out. I need to reposition it because it moves both the start and the end point. So I'll baseline first, I'll go to Modify, Reposition, Start Point. Just squidges it up. Then I'll move my crosshairs to the right hand side and just double check. Yep, the end point finishes in exactly the right position. There we go. I have scaled my inner leaf border to fit in between these 2 points. So let's have a look. That's the quilt. There's the quilt. And if I move this to the ending leaf and to the starting leaf, I can see it fits beautifully. Now I just need to stitch it out. So move it close-ish. Go to, I baseline it, Pro-Stitcher, Quilt, Run, Proceed. Takes a stitch, I move it away, move it back close-ish, resume. And there we go, one happy little Pro-Stitcher Lite. Stitching away. Keep holding your scissors, it's not going to be long. And then I will have finished this top and bottom, and I just have to rotate it and finish the side borders. One more leaf to go. One little down leaf. Oh, it's beautiful. It fits beautifully. There we go. Lovely jubbly. Ending stitches. And one more for good luck. Go away, come back, needle down, needle up. Woohoo! Yeah, done deal. We can go home. We can take the quilt off the frame. We've done it. We just have to rotate the quilt now. Take it off. I did rotate this the wrong way, by the way. That was deliberate. I didn't want to repin it. I'm so pleased. I am so pleased. I'm genuinely a very happy camper. It's Friday. It's time to go home. And I've finished what I wanted to finish. Right, I'm just going to unpin that. I'm going to leave that like that until tomorrow. And I'm going to come back and finish it off and rotate it. Isn't that great? Oh, it looks really good. I've got to say, I'm loving these chevrons. Let me just show you. So this is going to come back on this frame in this direction. And it's actually big enough. The quilt frame is big enough. Well, that's a bonus, isn't it? Let me just unplug this because I'm getting restricted by the cable. I've been doing so much recording today. Here we go. There we go. That's my quilt. Sweet.